Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Why the Warren Commission may be the greatest fraud perpetrated on the American public. Now your host, Len Osanic.
Even though the Warren Commission hedged some of its bets, such as acknowledging they never could assign a motive to their assassin, the conclusion of a single gunman being responsible for the president's death, and that there was absolutely no conspiracy has always been a hallmark of the Commission's shoddy work. Indeed, ever since the Warren Commission handed in its final report, the American establishment has treated any dissent from this official position as a sign of disloyalty, unworthy, and as a mark of a conspiracy theorist. Never has honest political historical research been mentioned. But a little-known fact is, the first critic of the Warren Commission was on the Warren Commission itself. His critique, like so many other facts, have been covered up. Author Gerald McKnight tells the story of the first dissenter, Senator Richard Russell.
This is Gerald McKnight, the author of Breach of Trust. Russell is the first dissenter of the Warren Commission report. And he was on the Warren Commission. So Russell is not like these clowns we have in the Senate today. This guy was serious business. Russell was elected to the upper house in 1933. He was a senior member of the upper chamber and respected by his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. He was even celebrated as the quote-unquote dean of the Senate by Ted Kennedy, who of course had different views than Russell on the civil rights question. He spent a lot of time and energy, unfortunately, in trying to prevent any kind of progress for black people in this country. I mean, he was speaking for Georgia. He's a segregationist in that sense. He was wrong. He was wrong. But he was able to work with the Democrats on other issues. And he was highly respected. Russell was horse-collared by President Johnson to be a member of the Warren Commission. Russell protested, but Johnson had his way by telling Russell it would not take all of his time. And even more instrumental was LBJ's tactic of dangling in front of Russell the prospect that unless the American people were satisfied that Kennedy was the victim of a lone assassin, that right-wing elements in the nation might push this country into a confrontation with the Soviet Union with the prospect of 40 million dead Americans. He used that on Russell, he used that on Warren also, who was reluctant. But once Warren got that kind of pitch, he broke into tears and said, certainly, I'll work on the commission. It should be noted that all of LBJ's choices for the commission, after each was waved under Hoover's nose for his approval, none of them, Democrats or Republicans, were supporters and were political allies of President Kennedy. Russell spent most of the life of the Warren Commission absenting himself from the work and sometimes even skipping the executive sessions. In May, FBI Director Hoover addressed the commission. He was quick to assert that there was, quote, not a scintilla of evidence showing any foreign or domestic conspiracy in the Kennedy killing, unquote. He went on in the same vein, launching a preemptive strike against any future dissenters and critics of the commission and, by extension, the FBI, the commission's investigative arm. The irony here is that little did Hoover suspect that the first dissenter of the official story was Senator Richard Russell.
Well, they were trying to prove that the same bullet that hit Kennedy first was the one that hit Connally. Went through him, through his hand, his bone, into his leg, and everything else. Just a lot of stuff there. I couldn't get all the evidence and cross-examine all of them. But I did read the record, and
well, what difference did it make which bullet got Connally?
Well, it don't make much difference, but they said that they believe, that the commission believed that the same bullet that hit Kennedy hit Connally. Well, I don't believe it.
I don't either.
And so I couldn't sign it. And I said that Governor Connally testified directly to the contrary, and I'm not going to approve of that. So I finally made them say there was a difference in the commission in that. Part of them believed that wasn't so.
On September 18th, 1964, Senator Russell forced a special executive session of the commission. Russell explained to his commission colleagues that he could not sign a report stating that the same bullet that hit President Kennedy exited his body and went into Connally. This would be part of it we recognize essential to the single bullet theory, which was essential to the contention that there was one shooter and that shooter was Oswald. He had some reservations, and he wanted these in the record because he wanted his constituents at home who put him into office be respected in the terms that that's why they put him in office, to be a caretaker and to look after their interests. Kentucky's Republican Senator John S. Cooper was persuaded to join Russell in his dissent, and Louisiana's Hale Boggs was wavering and tilting toward also joining the dissenters and rejecting the single bullet explanation. It should be noted that Russell's rejection of the single bullet theory was part and parcel of his displeasure of the quality of the FBI investigation and the information it fed to the commission. After an exhausting morning search for some mutual solution to the impasse, John McCloy came up with language that both the majority and the Russell faction could reluctantly agree upon. Russell's contention to the single bullet theory was softened to a degree by his insistence that the report include language categorically conceding that Oswald could not have carried out the assassination on his own. While the special September session ostensibly came equipped with stenographers who were presumably recording the session for the record and for posterity, this was all a fiddle. Rankin, and it had to be with Warren's permission, had the whole thing staged, and it was nothing more than an empty performance. Russell was aware that a stenographer was in the room while the commission was in session, but the stenographers were not even bothering taking notes. They were hired by Rankin to deceive Russell. There was, in fact, no record made of the September executive session called by Russell. Harold Weisberg, I was a neighbor of his, one of the early critics of the Warren Commission, and really one of the more successful critics, learned from rumors circulating in Washington that the September 18th session was a fakery. He contacted the National Archives in Washington, D.C. for a copy of the verbatim transcript. He learned that there was no record of any session, just some quote-unquote secretarial business notes about when the commission members could expect copies of the Warren report and other innocuous tripe. When Weisberg showed Russell Archivist Rhodes' letter, Russell was aghast. This kind of suppression was outside his experience on his 40 years in Capitol Hill. He resigned his chairmanship from the Military Affairs Committee and divested himself of his oversight responsibilities on the CIA. He urged Weisberg to continue his work on the Kennedy assassination, and so we have here Russell, who emerges as the first dissenter of the Warren Commission report. He never changed his mind about Oswald as the assassin of Kennedy, but he believed that Oswald had not acted alone.
Stay tuned for the next installment as we expose week after week 50 lies the Warren Commission would like you to believe.